I was standing in the middle of my own living room, my cheek burning with a fire that had nothing to do with the stove, and everything to do with the man I had raised from a tiny, helpless infant. My son, Mark, stood over me with a look of such casual coldness that it made the 30 stinging blows he had just delivered feel like ice, water running through my veins. He didn't punch me, no. That would have left marks that he couldn't explain away. Instead, he had turned it into a game, a humiliating, repetitive demonstration of his supposed dominance in front of his smirking wife, Chloe, and her judgmental parents. He called it a correction, slapping me lightly but firmly over and over, 30 times for every mistake he claimed I had made as a mother, while Chloe recorded it on her phone, laughing about how grandma needs to learn her place. I stood there, a 60-year-old widow in the house I had bought and paid for, being treated like a disobedient pet by the person I loved most in the world. As the last slap landed, and Mark told me to go to my room and think about my attitude, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply turned around, walked up the stairs, and realized that the son I had raised was dead, replaced by a monster of my own making. Was I wrong for what I did next, for deciding that if I was such a burden and a nuisance in his life, I should remove the one thing that gave him his status and his comfort? Tell me, if your own flesh and blood humiliated you for sport in front of strangers, would you have turned the other cheek, or would you have burned the bridge behind you and left them standing in the ashes? I need to take you back to the beginning, because everyone in our small town thinks I'm the villain. They see a poor, struggling young couple and their baby thrown out on the street by a bitter old woman. But they didn't see the years of entitlement that led to that moment. My husband, George, passed away 5 years ago, leaving me with a successful family, owned hardware business, and a sprawling 4-bedroom colonial house in one of the best school districts in the state. Mark was always a sensitive child, or at least that's how I excused his laziness. He struggled to keep a job, always blaming toxic management or unfair quotas, while George and I picked up the slack. When George died, Mark expected to inherit everything immediately. He was furious to find out that George had left the house and the business entirely in my name, with a trust set up for Mark that he couldn't touch until he was 45. He felt betrayed by his father, and from that moment on, his love for me became conditional on how much money I gave him. 2 years ago, Mark met Chloe. She was young, ambitious in all the wrong ways, and she saw me as a walking ATM. They got married within 6 months, and before the honeymoon was over, they were complaining about their tiny, cramped apartment. They suggested that they move into my big house to help take care of me as I got older. I was lonely and grieving, so I agreed. I told them they could live their rent free so they could save for their own place. That was my first mistake. The moment they moved in, the dynamic shifted. Chloe started redecorating without asking, throwing away my late husband's belongings because they ruined the aesthetic. Mark stopped looking for work entirely, claiming he was managing the household, which really just meant playing video games and ordering expensive takeout on my credit cards. They treated the master suite as their own and relegated me to the small guest room near the kitchen. I tolerated it because Chloe got pregnant, and I desperately wanted to be a part of my grandson's life. But once little Leo was born, the help they promised turned into me being a full-time, unpaid nanny and maid. They would go out to parties and dinners, leaving me with the baby for 12 hours at a time, and if the house wasn't spotless when they returned, I would get a lecture. The night of the incident started like any other celebratory dinner. Chloe's parents were over, and they were talking about how successful Mark was becoming. In reality, he had just asked me for another $50,000 to start a crypto consulting business. When I finally found my backbone and said no, the atmosphere turned toxic. Mark started belittling me, calling me senile and selfish in front of our guests. He told everyone that I was lucky they let me stay in their house. When I corrected him and reminded him that the deed was in my name, he snapped. He told me I needed to be disciplined for my disrespect. He made me stand in the center of the room while he performed that horrific slapping game, claiming it was a way to reset my brain. Chloe's father just watched, sipping his wine, while Chloe filmed it for their private family chat. They thought I was broken. They thought they had finally cowed me into submission, so they could convince me to sign the house over to them. They didn't realize that as a woman who had run a business for 30 years, I knew exactly how to handle a hostile takeover. So that's the situation I was in. I was a woman who had been physically and emotionally assaulted by her own son in her own home, while his wife filmed it for entertainment. I realized that as long as I owned that house, they would never leave me alone, and as long as they lived there, I would never be safe. I had a choice. I could call the police and deal with the messy, public drama of a domestic violence charge that might not even stick, or I could use the one power I had left, the power of ownership. I decided right then that if they wanted to treat me like a tenant in my own home, I would show them what an actual eviction looked like. Before I tell you how I managed to sell a 4-bedroom house in less than 8 hours, and the look on Mark's face when he came home to a sold sign in a locksmith, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have called the cops, or would you have hit them where it hurts the most, their bank account and their comfort? Tell me if you think I went too far, because what happened next was the most calculated move of my entire life. The next morning, I waited until Mark and Chloe left for their spa day, which they had charged to my secondary credit card. As soon as their car cleared the driveway, I didn't cry. I didn't pack a suitcase. I called a man named Elias. Elias was a high-end real estate developer who had been trying to buy my property for years because it sat on 2 acres of prime land that he wanted to subdivide. I had always told him no because of the memories, but memories don't mean much when they're stained with the palm prints of a son who hates you. I told Elias, I'm ready to sell. I want a cash offer, I want a 24-hour closing, and I'm willing to take a 10% hit on the market value if we can finish the paperwork by 5 o'clock. Today, Elias didn't ask questions. He knew the situation with Mark. He arrived at the house within 30 minutes with a mobile notary and a digital contract. I signed everything, the house, the land, even the furniture. I sold it all as a turnkey package. I didn't want a single stick of furniture that they had sat on. The only things I kept were my jewelry, George's ashes, and a small box of photos from before Mark turned into a stranger. While the paperwork was being processed, I called a professional moving crew and a junk removal service. I told them anything not in the guest room was to be packed and put into a storage unit under Mark's name, and the junk was to be hauled away. I paid them double to work fast. By 3:00 p.m., the house was an empty shell, save for the guest room where I had my things. At 4:00 p.m., the wire transfer hit my account. I was officially a multi-millionaire, and I was officially homeless by choice. I called a locksmith and had every single exterior lock changed. Then, I called a private security firm to stand guard at the end of the driveway. I sat on my porch in a lawn chair, waiting. At 6:30 p.m., Mark's BMW pulled into the drive. He saw the sold sign first. He hopped out of the car, laughing, thinking it was a prank I was playing to get back at him. "Mom, very funny, but the neighbors are going to think we're moving," he shouted. Then he saw the security guards. He saw the locks. He saw Chloe's designer shoes and his gaming rig sitting in a heap of boxes near the mailbox. The transition from confusion to pure, unadulterated rage was the most satisfying thing I have ever witnessed. He tried to storm the front door, but the security guard, a man twice his size, stepped in his way. "I'm sorry, sir, but the owner of this property has requested that you stay off the premises," the guard said. Mark screamed, "I am the owner. This is my house." I walked to the edge of the porch, clutching the final closing documents. I looked down at him and said, "No, Mark, this was my house. Now it belongs to Elias and his development firm. Your mistakes cost you 30 slaps last night, and they cost you a roof today. I paid for a storage unit for 1 month. After that, your life is your own problem." Chloe started screaming about the baby, about how I couldn't do this to a child. I reminded her that they had over $20,000 in their joint account from the gifts I had given them over the last year. Plenty for a hotel. I told them that if they ever contacted me again, I would release the video Chloe took of the slapping game to the police and the local news. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he saw a person, not a resource. He realized that the weak, sane, a woman he had been bullying, was the only thing standing between him and the cold reality of the world. They had to leave with nothing but the clothes on their backs and what fit in their car. I moved into a luxury high-rise condo in the city that night, a place with a doorman and a strict no-visitor policy. My neighbors still talk, and Mark has tried to sue me 3 times to get into the trust, but my lawyers are better than his will ever be. He's currently working a minimum wage job at a warehouse, and Chloe left him 6 months ago when the money ran out. The moral of this story is that you can only push a person so far before they realize that the only thing holding them back is their own misplaced loyalty. I loved my son, but I loved my dignity more. I didn't sell his house. I sold the prison he had built for me and bought my freedom with the proceeds. If you think I did the right thing by taking back my life, like this video and share your thoughts. Some say I should have forgiven him for the sake of the baby, but I believe that a child is better off away from a father who thinks it's okay to hit his mother for fun. Subscribe for more stories about people who finally reached their breaking point and fought back. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Would you have let him keep the house if there was a grandchild involved? Or is there no excuse for what he did? I'll see you all in the next story.